So, welcome to Satsang. Haven't left the Katir at all today. I'm still plagued by some Varanasi bug. I'm happy to see all of you. Who has something for us? Ma?
Oh, good morning, Nataraj ji. Excuse me. I'm so happy to see you and everyone. It's so great to be in Satsang. A couple of satsangs ago, you mentioned the practice of Tratak and how powerful that practice can be, but it was just sort of brief. And I thought maybe you could expound on that a little bit. And in connection with that, I have a question. As I started to think about it, I've been in classes with other teachers, and one teacher recommended and talked about practicing Tratak with other people and even with oneself in the mirror and how powerful that was. I was in another class with another teacher who said, totally opposite. Oh, this is not a good practice with other people. It's not something you want to do. So I just wondered if you would like to, if you have thoughts on that.
Yes. Thank you. So many of you probably know, but just in case, Tratak is the practice of gazing, I guess we could say, with a flame or a yantra, a sacred image, and the photo of your guru. Photo of a saint or a sage, something you connect with, But something sacred, this is important. And the practice is, I'm not really a student of Tratak, but a practitioner. So all I can share with you is my own experience with it, my own way of relating to it, which is that being about 1.5 to 2 feet away from an object, a flame, let's say, you hold the flame intensely in your gaze, not moving, aware of the flame like your drishti, like you're doing a balance pose in hatha yoga, in yoga asana. And there is an alertness and a focus, not blinking. And so very focused on the drishti, on the object at the center. If you're gazing with a yantra, a sacred yantra, like a mandala, a sacred geometry, and so there's an alertness and a focus, and simultaneously you develop a diffuse soft awareness of the entire periphery of your vision, the full circumference of your periphery. And so there's these two things simultaneous. There's a focus and there's a softness. A sharpness and a clarity, and a softness and a diffuse awareness. It's a very powerful practice. In the practice of Tratak, I like to imagine gazing not just with the two eyes, but also with the third eye, and allowing the flame or the yantra to move into the third eye, and for the third eye to move to the flame. A superimposition happens, they come together. Emerging. And with a sacred object, you come into presence. And then looking from the two eyes and the third eye, and then looking from the heart. So from the heart, an intense focus on the object, and a diffuse, soft awareness of the entire environment. So from the heart, aware of the space behind us, aware of the space between us and the object, the space behind the object, that all of this is happening in space, both subject and object, perceiver and perceived, existing in space. And in a subtle acrobatics of consciousness, that subject and object and the space held also are contained within your very own heart, in the body. And now you develop an awareness of subject and object. You sidle up to the awareness of subject and object, meaning the awareness is of the subject. So subject is object to awareness, and object is object to awareness. And now there are three, you see? And then this practice can be taken into the world. This is what you see in the eyes, in the portrait, in the eyes of a mystic, a seer. A sage, that a portrait of Ramana Maharshi, of Ramakrishna, You can see somehow, they see something. Maybe we could say, somehow always engaged in some kind of tratak with the world, a merged experience of inner and outer, in awareness as awareness. And so you can see, Ma, as you were asking, if you were to engage in the mirror, in your own eyes, there must be some psychological stability for this. There must be some groundedness for this. In these kinds of practices, it can be easy to get carried away. They're powerful, available to everybody, but powerful. And so not a bad thing to do if you're stable enough to engage in that way. To engage in Tratak with your own eyes in the reflection of a mirror, or to engage in Tratak of eye gazing with another. With another, you should be careful where you look, because this is a yoga, a merging. So, I don't know if you've noticed, even around awakened ones, yogis, maharajas, they don't engage in eye contact lightly. Have you noticed this? When they do, have you noticed, like me, that it's a great generosity? They're sharing something that's profound. But your eyes are a portal. It's not just a saying, the eyes are the window to the soul. So I think it's both can be a very beautiful practice and also be discerning. Something is shared with eye contact. There's a transmission. Two ways. But this practice of Tratak in the privacy of your own meditation room or someplace remote and private, it's very powerful. This practice of being in the world, perhaps sitting alone, Swami Shivananda, in his universal prayer, says, "Let us behold thee, Lord, in all these names and forms." This practice will bring one to behold. It's different than looking or seeing, to behold. Can you feel the difference? Behold. You know, when it's said there's only one God, what if it actually means that God alone exists in everything, always and forever? That maybe the interpretation that my one God versus your one God is just a folly, a misunderstanding. But that anyone who can behold will see that all the while nothing has ever been happening other than God looking back at you. In all these names and forms. That there is nothing not sacred. Nothing in this duality that's excluded. The mind will rebel at that. Even just endeavoring to see slightly differently, I suggest a practice actively. Shift the focus of your awareness to the space between you and the object of your attention. Make the space between things primary and the objects secondary. You can do it right now. Does something shift for you? Become aware of the space behind you, that it's there. Now, do you have a sense that you are in space? Maybe it sounds silly, but does something shift? Maybe if you can soften into this sense of being in space, and imagine that you're being held, swaddled. That the space between us is love, the space behind us is love. Swaddled in that, held in that, and behold, beheld in love. And I assure you, what is possible on your own, what is possible in satsang, in a group meditation, is possible at your office, in the car, at a cafe. Developing an intimacy in your relationship with space. Probably you've heard that the whole universe, the universe made of matter, comprises 0.00001%. That's what matters. And 99% of our attention is focused on that. Maybe we could call it a sort of Newtonian consciousness. It's not wrong. It's just not complete and proportionally out of balance. Maybe that's not entirely accurate from a scientific perspective, but what we're trying to do here is shift our awareness, lean into what is lesser known. To gently interrupt the patterns of our conscious awareness to perceive differently, better. I am quite sure anyone who does this for 2 weeks with persistence, maybe setting reminders 20 times a day on the phone, whatever you're doing, something will shift. Something will shift in you. I guarantee it. It'd be better. The more we practice making our way to or through to this way of perceiving, the more quickly we can get there. It's a refuge of sorts. And with practice, you'll be able to come there very quickly. This place, when you find it, might feel like home. And with continued practice, you might just abide in that. So what starts as Tratak with a flame or a yantra or a sacred object can turn into a yoga, a merging, a yoking with you and the divine. Is this what's meant when Jesus says, "My yoke is light"? My yoga, merge with me. I will give you rest. This is the place of rest. You can even use it strategically in your life. Before you get out of bed, come home, and then get out of bed. Before you get in the shower, come home, and then get in the shower. Before you walk into a meeting, one you expect to be pleasant or one you expect especially to be unpleasant, come home first. Come back to the stillness and move from there. You will be amazed at how much more effective you are. With 10% of the effort, so much more effective than your previous 110% of effort. So much energy in reserve. So this even is a very practical matter. I don't know, but I imagine many of the very successful people in the world have a practice like this, some form of meditation. If anybody decides to try it, and then beyond deciding to try it, actually does it, it's a rare combination, these two, by the way. To decide to do it and then to actually do it. Well, anyway, if anybody actually does it, please come back and let us know how it's working. You know, it reminds me, I heard a yogi, a swami, I imagine, say, you have all of these practices. All of this you call sadhana. Your routines, your efforts, and to applaud that. And yet he also says, the great ones all did the same thing. They fasted and kept quiet for 40 days or more. When you make contact with the fruit of Tratak, this place of home, nothing need be said, and hunger disappears. For a time. What can you say now, Ranjani Ma? Is that helpful?
Yes, it's helpful. And I appreciate. I see it's a very powerful practice. I've seen that.
It's not unlike your practice of thresholds.
It shows.
Yeah. For some time, some years really, she's been doing this practice of thresholds. Anytime you open a door to walk through, you come back to the presence. Anytime you move from carpet to tile, from cement to grass, come back. From the stillness of now, everywhere you turn is a portal. From stillness, looking out at the world, you see it as it is. So many invitations. So many doors. But for the mind that's locked in body consciousness, a sort of a linear, always acutely attuned to matter, somehow not seeing the space. Everything seems very angular and linear. This is just one practice, a way of broadening your perception. Zooming out. Okay. Who has something else they've been contemplating, pondering?
I have a question. So I'm going to school in Brazil in like two
Right.
months.
Yeah, I remember now.
I'm going for five months. And I'm just wondering, I just feel a little maybe overwhelmed of like all the possibilities in such a big city, a city of like 22 million people. And I'm also been told that it's not like the safest place. So I guess I'm just kind of a little scared about the uncertainty. I feel like I've been in like a schooling system for like 20 years, and now my whole world is kind of opening up in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Narayana. Let's be sure to reconnect later to give you some contacts in Brazil as well. So much of our life, we could say, is lived in anticipation. And sometimes this anticipation has the flavor of dread. We can oversimplify things. Let's do. In the past, we have what we might call resentment, and we have nostalgia. In the future, we have anticipation and dread. Moving out of the familiar is exhilarating. And can also be terrifying. There is such a strong desire in the human mind to be certain of its place in the world. We're so drawn to familiarity. We think of it as comforting. Is it? Is familiar actually comfortable? Maybe. Maybe not. But something in us really likes to think we know our place. We like to know our route to school, to work. We don't like to be lost, do we? We really don't like to not know. What's it like for you when you have to ask directions? I think it's different for each one, but what's it like for you? to not know, to have to ask, to feel exposed like you don't know, vulnerable. In Toronto, you know where to go and where to avoid. And you've got all of your favorite places figured out, all of your friends. It wasn't always that way, though, was it? All the transitions, from home with mother to, excuse me, from home with mother to kindergarten, to middle school, high school, university, first job. All of these had some excitement and some anxiety. Yeah? Come to know the root of this anxiety. We like to know that we belong. We like to know who we are. And what is the world? And what is our relationship with the world? We need that so much that it's sufficient for us to think that we know and be mistaken about the whole thing. You see, because the truth is that when you come to find yourself, the idea of not belonging becomes absurd. As absurd as the idea of belonging in a relative way. You know the saying, wherever you go, there you are? It means different things depending on who the you is that you think you are, know you are. I was recently reminded of a story about Ramana Maharshi in Tiruvannamalai, India. One of his disciples said, "Oh Lord, what will we do when you're gone?" And not being clever, just responding honestly, in truth, he says, "Where could I go?" Where could I go? The one who can utter those words is the one in awareness that's here, now. This one is always at home, always belongs. Okay, so now to the practical. These things, it's very important we know them as truths. even if it's a thread of a belief, to just keep in your back pocket. But we also, in addition to leaning into the truth always, we must simultaneously be honest with our experience. Not claiming it as truth, but owning it as honest. Do you see the difference? So in truth, Narayana, you're no more in peril here or there. You are the immortal soul. This is true. That we don't know this is the cause of all of the trouble. But it doesn't make it any less true. And simultaneously, where there is this experience of fragility, vulnerability, we, being true to ourselves, being honest, we hold all of that in compassion. As a matter of practicality, whatever practices you have, double down on them now before you leave and take them with you. Not easy. Not easy to do practice in the familiar. Much harder to do practice when we leave the familiar into a new environment. But it's very powerful. For an aspiring yogi, the daily routine, the practice, is the template that provides the freedom to explore the realms of consciousness. The template, the practice, the regimen. This is actually the framework of your freedom. You see, we think we don't want to be confined by some discipline. But the one who doesn't want to be confined is the very one that's causing the trouble. So the template of your sadhana is the framework of your very freedom. And if you have a framework and cultivate this with discipline over time, it goes with you wherever you are. You'll make minor adaptations in schedule and the types of food that you eat and where you get food, and all kinds of things will have to adapt. But the basic structure will always be yours. And it will be up to you whether or not to compromise. You will make those decisions. But you are you wherever you are. Wherever you go, there you are. So, who are you? What are you taking with you? One of my favorite little anecdotes is I think it's the San Diego Zoo. Some tiger is in a very small enclosure and they raise money to create this whole beautiful environment for it with grass and toys and much bigger. Previously it was in a cage and on a chain, and it's sort of just, paced back and forth. And all the grass was turned into dirt, dust, and just paced with some kind of depressive anxiety. And they were all excited. They had a sort of inaugural opening of the new space, the new environment, and they let the tiger out, and it just paced the same. No chain, no cage, but just paced back and forth in the same. Is the familiar really comfortable? Is what we call comfortable really comfortable? Think about what kind of foods people refer to as comfort food. Generally speaking, how does it make you feel a half an hour after eating it? Is it comfortable? What is this in us? What is the clinging to the familiar? And what is the resistance to the unfamiliar? You see, you, Narayana, have this incredible karma, a really beautiful karma, a beautiful prarabdha of so many blessings, worldly blessings in this lifetime, yes? And even with all of this, it's true for all of us. The unfamiliar is still a bit scary, but also exhilarating. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. There was one yogi who went from Satchidananda Ashram Yogaville to Shivananda Ashram Bahamas. I thought they'd love it. But they were so locked into the integral yoga hatha sequence. Did not like to veer from it at all. And we talked about it before they went. And then after a couple of weeks of hatha 2 times a day, really developed an affinity for the Shivananda sequence, which, oddly enough, came from the same Shivananda, one through Swami Satchidananda to integral yoga, and the other through Swami Vishnu Devananda to Shivananda ashrams. And then when they came back to Virginia, they didn't like going back to the IY hatha sequence. We just seem to have this affinity to what we already know. At some point, the yogi must detach from the familiar. It will happen. Maybe the world will conspire and you'll be coerced to detach because, like one would run out of a burning building, this is also a blessing. But one can decide. And this is a great symbol of venturing out. leaving the familiar into the unknown. One day also you'll do it in meditation. It's good practice. What is my allegiance to the familiar? Ask yourself. How many times have I moved out of my comfort zone? How did it go? It's not to say that it'll always go the same or that we'll always be smooth. No. But you being here is evidence that you've survived every single one of them so far. And then wait for the first time you get sick in Brazil. And then you'll feel alone. But for the one who really embraces the fear and the loneliness and stands in it in faith, will be taken care of. It's a guarantee. Soup will come your way. Send pictures. I love this. Narayana sends me pictures, not all the time, but regularly. I love to see it.
Sounds good.
And if I can do satsang from India, you can do it from Brazil.
Nataraj.
Yes.
And everyone, thank you for this morning. When you said in your description of the practice, I can't quite pronounce.
Tratak.
Thank you. You said when gazing into another's eyes, you may or be careful. And I wondered if it, how everyone feels if they were said to be full of care. As I recall being introduced in a room of strangers to a practice of grieving together, loss of any kind. And people did raise their hand to identify they knew someone in the group. So we were paired with strangers, and we looked into each other's eyes without saying anything, but we knew for a brief moment of time, two circles facing each other, and then we moved. Words eventually were only spoken if there was in a communicator and a receiver
identified as one who could speak. And so I offer that to listen because it felt full of care, though some in the room were experiencing profound loss. Everyone was there for some reason, of course. That's it.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. There is something really beautiful in human connection like this. This is compassion. Do you know this? Compassion literally means suffering together. That passion means suffering and compassion means suffering together. It's beautiful. And maybe we could say that the human spiritual journey is from passion to compassion to dispassion. Dispassion has a nasty little connotation for us, doesn't it? But this is yoga. Dispassion is actually unconditional love. It's the absence of suffering. It doesn't make one or the other wrong. The one looking from a dispassion, a vairagya, an agape, an unconditional love, has no problem with passion or compassion. But one looking from passion could have a problem. One looking from compassion could have a problem. So there's nothing wrong with any of these. And this compassion is a really sacred human experience. And this connecting and sharing, Sangha, real Sangha. Not just community, but Sangha. Where, as you say, in a sacred space, with shared intention of healing and loving and being loved, this, I would say, is exercising great care. The word I used was not be careful, as I remember, but it was be discerning. Know what you're connecting with and why. We are porous. Each I, individual, relative I, is more of a we than we know. We occupy shared spaces in the mind. Maybe we could say telepathy is ubiquitous. Awareness of telepathy may be rare. Ability to use it may be rarer still. But we are always weing together. And when you make eye contact, when you hug, touch, all of these things, this is very intimate, much more intimate than we ever imagined. In the land of yoga, the Indians are not very touchy-feely. Not a lot of hugging happening. This isn't to make hugging wrong. Please don't be binary like this, but understand there is a wisdom, an ancient wisdom in keeping one's energy to oneself, especially depending on the environment. So this is all I'm encouraging, is some discernment about how it is we connect. I once heard one yogi sage say, it made so much sense, but I'd never thought of it before, that when we have physical intimacy with another, the energy is such that we're now connected to everybody they've been intimate with. that there's a connection. A we happens. Not to make it a moral judgment, but really it's about preservation of the sovereignty of your soul, which first and foremost has its power, its source, drawn from God. You know, and there's the hugging saint Amaji. So this is not to develop opinions, but just to have exposure to the different aspects of consciousness and humanity connection. It's really not about right and wrong. So much healing happens in Sangha and in connection, in eye gazing, in touching, in hugging. It's an important thing. So we just have a little bit of time left, I hear. We've decided that by Wednesday we'll be feeling better here. It's been some week in Varanasi. Oh my goodness. Yesterday, we went to the big hospital in Varanasi to get a chest x-ray. It's a very different experience, a hospital in Varanasi. Varanasi previously known as Benares, and before that Kashi. It's believed that if you die on the banks of the Ganges, of Ma Ganga, and the body is burned in a pyre, and the ashes swept into the Ganges, that this one will be freed from the cycle of birth and death, of samsara. So many Hindus come here to die. My first meditation in Varanasi, it's potent. And then to be in the hospital yesterday, gurneys everywhere, bodies. Families gathered around their loved ones, all in this open space in the lobby, you could call it, I suppose. Death. The intersection of life. And in all of that, at the intersection of what we would, in body consciousness, say the intersection of life and death, the intensity of it and the intense beauty of it, everything was so normal. We were greeted, ushered through. Everybody was so kind. Guided every step of the way. The ceiling tiles in the XA room are falling down. They're dirty and dusty and cobwebs. A completely and normal, to them, familiar. And we were so well cared for. Got everything we needed. I also recently, as many of you know, I sat with my father and my mother as my father left his body on the 11th of November. So profoundly beautiful. But I could feel his anxiety of detaching from his own body. This is moving into something unfamiliar, I think, for most of us. In that moment, each one turns from the world, the reflected light, to the light. You've heard it? Turn to the light. You turn from the reflected light of the world, the mirror, to the source of light. Now, all of this is practice for that. Detach, attach. Turn away, turn within. Come to know the source of I, this I sense. Find that, and wherever you go is home. I couldn't say it's familiar. I think maybe we could say we just get used to having no idea what's happening. Everything is so totally unfamiliar, but somehow the anxiety evaporates. So it's always good practice. Thank you. Om.